The following program is a podcast1.com production.
Your healthy radio addiction starts now.
Power to the people!
The Laura Ingraham Show.
Oh, every road has got to end somewhere. Now is the time for the showdown. So let me give you the lowdown. We've come to the end of our road.
This morning, 8 members of the so-called migrant caravan allowed to enter the federal building here on the border to start applying for asylum. What's not clear is when or if they'll actually be granted permission to enter the country. More than 100 are still waiting for their chance. These families desperate, so close to the U.S., yet still so far from their dream.
We are a nation of laws. We have to have borders. We don't have borders, we don't have a country. And I've been watching for weeks as the caravan came up. You got to have a wall. And we need border security. And we will have border security.
I've been thinking a lot about this mass invasion of our southern border. And the more I think about it, the more I think this is perhaps the magic bullet for the midterm elections. Now, you can agree or disagree with me, but just hear me out. Donald Trump was elected to make America great again, meaning get our economy really revving. So you have the GDP at remarkable highs. You have, of course, consumer confidence, unemployment, a trend which began under Obama, but which picked up in earnest under this president. We have major corporations repatriating billions of dollars, including Apple and other heavy manufacturing, very optimistic about the future. So those jobs are, they're good paying jobs, and more money's coming in all the time. All that's happening. He also ran on just restoring safety, law and order. I think men like the phrase law and order. Women like the word safety, home. When you think of the Department Homeland Security, well, home, the word home, that means a lot to all of us. It evokes a special meaning. Our home, our homeland. Now, what is our homeland? Our homeland is, of course, a place where we believe in it's a land of the free and the home of the brave. And it doesn't mean free ride. It doesn't mean freely just walk in. It doesn't mean you're free to just make demands of everybody else. But it means if you follow the rules, you respect others, guess what? There's freedoms that are God-given that you have as Americans that the government cannot take away from you. Donald Trump campaigned on restoring safety and security at our borders and in our streets with MS-13, which, of course, and other gangs, not just MS-13, but that's the one most of us focus on, but there are many others. The Latin Kings, Florencia 13. I think there are 18 major gangs now that are fueled in part its membership by illegal immigrants. So that's why you have all these big multi-state task forces looking at how to curb the violence in the importation of drugs and guns and so forth, synthetic drugs, into cities like Miami and Chicago, Boston, Hartford, goes on and on. So this is really, when you think about it, the building the wall and beginning to make sense of our sovereignty, in restoring our sovereignty. Obviously, trade. He's doing the trade. Trade is happening. We see what's happening with NAFTA. It's still being negotiated. Lighthizer and Mnuchin are off to China today. We'll see what happens there. We got obviously major progress, perhaps with North Korea. So there's a lot happening. But we still have a major problem at our border, our southern border. And this caravan is something that happens annually, and it's representative of the larger problem facing our country, which is that our laws that exist, the laws that exist for asylum, are absurd. They are absolutely ridiculous. And they have been, as my guest on the Ingraham angle last night said, who used to be the acting, I think he was acting ICE director for a while, John Torres. He said, Laura, the 200 at the border, this is thousands and thousands and thousands a month. People claiming asylum, they are processed into the country, and then they are released. Why are they released? Well, we had a couple of obscene court decisions, the Flores case in 1997, and then years later an expansion of that jurisprudence, that precedent, which said that unaccompanied minor has to be released into society, even during the processing, before a hearing and so forth, and now parents also need to be released. So as long as you get here and you are processed in, you're golden. Doesn't matter if you have in a way, if you have a credible claim of asylum, because you will never show up for your hearing.
People are smart, and they see how ridiculous these laws are. They know if they can get anywhere near, once they touch our ground, it's called welcome to the United States. How crazy is it? How crazy are we to allow this?
The U.S. Customs Border Protection, of course, said that at least 8 were allowed in yesterday. About 140 others are still waiting in Mexico to turn themselves in. When you think of asylum claims really are individual claims, right? They're not, here's a group of people and they all want to come in at one time. But these are individuals who, look, they have a maybe lousy life in Honduras. The government there continues to fail its people. So they have a lousy life there, and then they want to come here. But that's not asylum. That's not what asylum laws were set up for. Those laws were designed to help those who are persecuted just for who they are, their religion, national origin, and so forth. Not just because, guess what? I'm a street vendor in Honduras, and I can't make the dough I know I can make in the United States with all the benefits there. And it's sad. It's terribly sad. Believe me, of all the time I spent in Central America, of all the time I spent in El Salvador and Guatemala, and just a year and a half ago when I went back with Maria, it is a breathtakingly beautiful place and a breathtakingly infuriating place. It is desperately sad. But guess what? We have a lot of problems in our own country that we must deal with, and that we cannot expect to be able to fix our own country while we let thousands of people pour across our borders on these spurious claims of asylum. It is ridiculous. Congress must act. And the sanctuary cities and the sanctuary states that exist in this country that are magnets for these Hondurans, Guatemalans, Salvadorans, etc., who cross our borders, they have a lot of blame here. And so I go back to the midterm election cycle. You have all these so-called moderate Democrats, John Tester, Claire McCaskill, etc., Joe Manchin. Now, do you know John Tester, supposed moderate Democrat of Montana? Do you know that he voted against Kate's Law? That he's for sanctuary cities? He wouldn't. I believe that he wouldn't vote for cloture on the sanctuary cities bill, so that went down in flames. Every single one of these so-called moderate Democrats should be challenged on the issue of immigration. Because I believe the American people are about fed up with the way the system is working. And entire communities in the United States have been transformed. Entire communities. The bedroom communities of Washington, D.C., I don't even recognize these communities. They're certainly not like 20 years ago when I moved here. These were, diverse, working class places. The idea of having gang violence in Manassas, Virginia? Are you kidding me? There was no gang violence in Manassas, Virginia. There was no gang violence in Gaithersburg, Maryland in 1990, 1986, 1987 when I first came here. I didn't have any of those problems. This was all imported into the United States by politicians and businesses who were in an unholy alliance for votes and cheap labor. And now Americans have to pick up the tab. This is ridiculous. And so the more they show that caravan, I think the better for the Republicans. The few people that might be able to claim credibly asylum, they should not be allowed to go into this country until their claim is litigated, processed, and determined. And if they are denied asylum, they should be expeditiously removed from this country. 855-40-LAURA. Do you agree with me on this? And by the way, $20 billion a year is wired back to Mexico. Just Mexico alone in remittances from the illegal immigrants here. $20 billion leaving our country. The cost overall of local, state, federal benefits, processing, legal counsel. By the way, each applicant for asylum gets an orientation. Are you ready for this? The Customs and Border Patrol detains you and provides you information about the credible fear process. So we're allowing them to learn from us as they apply. After you are detained, you will be given an orientation. An orientation to the credible fear process, a list of free or low-cost legal services providers, probably the Chamber of Commerce, at least 48 hours after your arrival at the detention site before taking part in the interview, you have the opportunity to waive that waiting period. And then they describe what credible fear of persecution means. So you got the lawyers, you got businesses in the United States, and you get politicians who do not do the will of the people. All three of those combined. And you want to know why we have this problem in this country? This is a political issue because it needs a political solution. And we need politicians who have the will to do what is necessary to stop the fraud in this asylum process, change the laws. You have immediate processing and immediate deportation. We do not have the manpower, the resources, the money. We don't have the time to do all this, let alone do it for thousands of people every week. And by the way, the number of family units crossing the border in March of last year compared to March of this year has doubled. The number total, I believe, was 17,000 family units crossing the border came into the country. I mean, and then there's 36,000 total or something. I mean, it's just, these are entire towns. You can figure it out. Do the math in your head. 855-40-LAURA. Let's go to Mike in Maine. Line 1. Mike.
Hey, Laura. Listen, you were just giving out the numbers of the remittance to Mexico. I mean, look, these little countries down there have caught on to this gig. They're going to send their people up here because they're just going to mail money back to Honduras, back to Guatemala. And these lawyers that are perpetrating this fraud, I don't know why their law licenses aren't being pulled. I mean, they violated every oath that they've taken,
No, they don't. They don't. They argue that they're just instructing them on the law and everybody deserves counsel. And, some of the lawyers actually live down in Mexico. Some of these lawyers are Americans who moved down to Baja and they live down there and then who knows? They're probably paid on retainer by some of these farm unions. I don't know. Who knows? But there's something going on with all this, But don't tell me that everybody's coming across the border and I saw it online somewhere that, these are very young mothers, a lot of them, very young. They look maybe 16, 17, 18 years old. I thought they were daughters of but they're young mothers. Some have 2 and 3 kids. And, God bless them. I mean, but that's a lot for the American taxpayer to take on with everything else that we have to deal with. You're listening to your Healthy Radio Addiction. Your reaction to this, the so-called moderate Democrats, where are they on this issue? The Republicans need to put this front and center for the midterm elections. Don't go away.
Don't close the door. Don't close the door.
I fled Honduras because they killed my husband and threatened me with death.
I received a lot of threats from the gangs, and that made me afraid for my life.
They come up because they know once they get here, they can walk right into our country.
Hey guys, it's Kelty Knight from the Lady Gang podcast. If you're into getting a very sassy, sexual, beautiful, inspiring, funny, oftentimes embarrassing, slightly anal podcast in your repertoire, subscribe to us, Lady Gang, on Podcast One, the Podcast One app. And please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts.
In order to get here, they passed through Mexico, which is by many measures a rich country. It's got the 15th largest economy in the world. Why doesn't the Mexican government help them?
Well, it's first of all, they don't want to stay in Mexico. They want to come to the United States. And second of all, if you're fleeing violence, if you're fleeing gangs in Honduras or El Salvador or Guatemala, why would you want to go to Mexico when in the last 5 years, more than 100,000 people were killed by drug violence? So they want to come to the United States.
Probably want to fly business class to Zurich and move to the Alps, but I don't get to because it's not my country. So
you want to close the United States? That's what you want to do. You want to close the United States? I mean, that's the kind of country you want to be in.
I want to revert to what we were, which is a country of laws where people can come here, but they do so legally.
Actually, I think if you did a referendum on should we take a pause on immigration, I think every time Gallup polls whether we should have more immigration or less, overwhelmingly it's either keep it the same or reduce immigration into the United States. Overwhelmingly. Every time they do a poll with those types of questions. Look, if we are overwhelmed in our country with problems and issues and financially strapped or in debt, why are we continuing to process people into the country who just disappear into the country? Why are we doing that? To me, that makes no sense. Let's go to Pete in Connecticut. Line 1, Pete.
Yeah, well, I grew up in Hartford. You know where that is.
Oh, yeah, I'm from Glastonbury.
I presently live in Wethersfield, and I've watched this escalate over the past 20 years. I'm in my 60s now.
Yep.
And I used to work on construction in Hartford. And we'd go to these places, really, and lately, over the past 10 years, it's absolutely deplorable. These people are underneath bridges sleeping. There's clothes, needles. They defecate there. And I couldn't even get in there to do my job. And it's widespread. And these are young people walking around. I mean, Hartford was transformed from a good middle-class working town to a sanctuary city, and it's evident. All you have to do is go around the streets, look at what's going on. There's shootings every night, and it's just absolutely deplorable.
It's heartbreaking. I mean, I remember my mom talking about how beautiful Hartford, Connecticut was. I mean, it was a long time ago, but that's our country, and we can't allow this to happen any longer.
I think that the comedian crossed the line, and this went from poking fun to being mean-spirited. It was very uncomfortable. I think that Sarah Sanders handled herself very well, considering what was coming her way, and I think that most people in that room were uncomfortable.
I wouldn't change a single word that I said. I'm very happy with what I said, and I'm glad I stuck to my guns.
Michelle Wolf, who pretty much no one I know knew who she was before this White House Correspondents' Dinner, and now people keep thinking it's Michael Wolff. No, it's Michelle Wolf. Michael Wolff wrote that stupid book, Fire and Fury. Now this is Michelle Wolf. You notice when she was on NPR yesterday, she didn't have that voice like this. Was that her voice, her stage voice? Isn't your stage voice supposed to be attracting people toward your performance? She sounded better on NPR when she was refusing to apologize than she did actually on stage at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Boy, am I sad that I didn't have a chance to participate in that spectacle. Wouldn't be caught dead at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Hannity was so funny last night. He said in 30 years in the media and radio and television, he's never been once. I haven't been in, 15 years. Maybe even longer. I thought Raymond and I went once, maybe 12 years ago. But I always have something better to do, and that means cleaning out my sock drawer or, rearranging the milk in the refrigerator, anything to avoid spending time with these people. Joining us now, I'm delighted he's with us, Brent Bozell. Of course, Brent founded the Media Research Center, Parents Television Council, CNSnews.com, and celebrating the First Amendment was what was supposed to happen at this White House Correspondents' Dinner. But it was a curtain-pulling moment. We pulled the curtain back, for any of you doubted, about the deep-seated animus of the elite press corps toward this president. Brent, it's great to see you. Great to see you. Great to hear. Great to have you on. How are you?
Hi, Laura. How are you? How are you doing? Yeah, I'm one behind Hannity. I went to one during the Clinton years, and I walked out of it because I was so disgusted by watching 2,000 people in an orgy of self-adoration. They really are so massively in love with themselves. And these are the same people who have spent the last 2 years denouncing this administration and this president in particular for being a hater and for being vile and for being mean-spirited and for being crude. And look who they chose to be their speaker at this dinner.
Had you ever heard of her before, Brent?
No, I hadn't, but apparently they had. And she did say, you knew what you were getting.
Well, that's a good point.
And that's exactly the point. They knew what they were getting. They knew what to expect. And now, oh my goodness, there's so much gnashing of teeth and beating of breasts. And oh my. No, they knew what they were doing. They knew what they got. And many of them laughed. The interesting thing is, in all the stories that have been written, do you realize that just about nobody has written the bad jokes? The truly nasty jokes that she told.
Yeah,
it is amazing.
Yeah, I had Ari Fleischer on last night, and he only had seen, I think, one of the sound bites from when they were a smoky eye thing about Sarah Huckabee. He hadn't heard the things that were said about Ivanka and Kellyanne. And right. He said, I'm really, as painful as it was to hear, I'm really glad you played that because America can see exactly what this is and exactly what this organization was, what a fraud basically it's become.
That's right. I thought it was rather interesting that one CNN reporter said that comedy is supposed to be uncomfortable. No, it's not. It's not supposed to be uncomfortable. It's supposed to be funny.
Right.
Now, it might be funny in a biting way, but remember George Bush 41 and how he laughed and laughed when Dana Carvey made fun of him and brought him to the White House because it was good-hearted fun. There's nothing good-hearted fun that comes out of these dinners, not in the last 5 years. These are as ugly can get. How can anyone defend a quote-unquote comedian who says about abortion, don't knock it till you try it.
No, and then knock it again.
When you try it, really knock it.
Yeah, really knock it.
We've got to get that baby out of there. And sure, you can groan all you want. I saw a lot of you that are very anti-abortion, unless it's the one you got for your secret mistress. This is hate-filled. This is beyond ugly to say of Ivanka Trump that she's about as helpful to women as a box of empty tampons.
It's vulgar and it's vulgar. It's unfunny, and it's stupid. Some of these jokes were like 8th grade, 7th grade humor. And mean-spirited. And even like when you go back and we'll play some Don Rickles when we bump out here. But Don Rickles, when he was like Mr. Warmth. They called him Mr. Warmth, but he was cutting, but it was hilarious. And it wasn't mean. It was cutting, but not mean. If you get my drift.
You want to see real comedy? Go watch one of those Dean Martin roasts.
Oh my God,
I
hilarious!
I can't get enough of them. Look at the way that he savaged everyone from Muhammad Ali to Ronald Reagan to Jimmy Starr to Jews to Catholics to Protestants, and everyone roared in laughter because of the innocence of Don Rickles. Again, there was nothing innocent there. The late great Steve Allen once said to me, "If you have to be vulgar, you're not funny."
No.
Think about that.
And listen to this: Seth Meyers of NBC's Late Night said of Wolf, who used to work on his show, she doesn't need anyone to defend her before somewhat agreeing with President Trump, who Wolf, he called it filthy. Then he said, "Just know that when you call her filthy," Myers said, "you're right. She is filthy, and she's mean, which is what we love about her." That's what Seth Meyers said.
Correct, and that's what they love about Donald Trump too, I guess, because they've been doing nothing but attack him for being mean, and everyone's playing this moral equivalency game. Oh yeah, she was pretty bad, but look, Donald Trump is pretty bad too.
What's that? Another eighth grade response. You said this about me 6 weeks ago.
Yeah, he says something to whatever that Bush guy was in private, and therefore she can say this on national television. I mean, there is it is so pedestrian, so babyship. But you're absolutely right in the very first thing you said. It pulled the curtain. Everybody can see the smarminess, the arrogance, the haughtiness of these people, and how they are the ones who are filled with hatred towards Donald Trump, not only for what he does, but for who he is.
Well, I think, again, in a way, this is a gift. As depressing as it is, that this is actually what people call humor in the United States.
And
it's a gift.
And look how smart Donald Trump is.
Oh, my gosh.
For the second year in a row, he held a rally with roaring crowds in real America while this was going on. This is the kind of stuff that got him elected president. And
right.
he still has that touch. He understands better than anybody that the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
This morning and last night, the other cable channels were obsessed with covering the so-called comment by John Kelly, chief of staff, on claiming he said Donald Trump was an idiot. This was all over morning cable, MSNBC, so forth. And again, this is what the press obsesses on. We have major news in China and in Europe with the aluminum and steel tariffs and what we're doing with North Korea. And yet the media they're desperate to put wedges into this administration and obsess about these irrelevant points. I mean, people call people idiots all the time. I'm sorry, but they do when they're mad. And we do that in families. Like, oh my God, Maria, you're an idiot. My kids and adult men do that. I mean, I'm sorry. It just doesn't worry me a bit. Even if he did say that, it doesn't worry me. But I don't think he did say it.
And well, numerous sources confirm. Many people have said you'll never get a name. You'll never get a name attached with all these things. When the French president was visiting the States, I saw a scroll on the bottom of a TV set on CNN. Trump touches president.
What? Oh, Trump touches. He was like, well, you got some dandruff on your. I think people love that because it's real.
Absolutely, including the French president who laughed.
I'm sorry, but I thought it was absolutely hilarious. And the French are so fastidious about their dress, and Trump's like, "Hey, you got something on your." I'm sorry, but I think it's a riot. He's not perfect. None of us are, but it's the madman theory, I think, of governance that got that Cabbage Patch President but Kim Jong-un to the table.
But this is cable news network that then wants the world to consider them to be such a serious network. I've never in my life known any network so obsessed about one thing as it is CNN obsessed with Donald Trump? We're not kidding here, Laura, when you and I say this is all they cover. There could be World War III. And they're going to say, yeah, but did President Trump touch somebody today? I mean, they're just, this it is such an unhealthy obsession. They then wonder why 91% of the public can't stand them.
No, it's and I think, again, meanwhile, there's really important work being done by, I think, two of our most talented cabinet members. One of them is Bob Lighthizer, and the other was Wilbur Ross, who are engaging in 3 major trade negotiations at one time. NAFTA, they're working with the Europeans on the aluminum and steel exemptions, perhaps, for some of our allies, and also the major deal going on with China right now, which is going to be perhaps negotiated or not this week. This has just never been done. I mean, I've been following and covering the trade issue because it's my issue. It's the thing I really care about with China. For the last 22 years, we have never had a team that has worked this hard in this complex series of negotiations and transactions as we've had with this team, and they get literally no credit. I've never seen anything like it. And we already have the South Korean deal that was totally redone already. That was already renegotiated.
No, nobody can question. No objective observer can deny that the reason the North Koreans are talking peace and reconciliation with the South and now talking about abandoning their nuclear program is because, and only because, of Donald Trump. Whether you support him or not, you cannot deny that. You can't take that away from him. And if you're going to give Barack Obama the Nobel Peace Prize for having done nothing,
oh my God,
if this continues moving in this direction, and we know the North Koreans lie all the time, we know that, but the fact of the matter is they do have their backs against the wall. They are in serious trouble because this president finally stood up to them. Republicans and Democrats alone, both on both sides, walked away from the Korea problem. This guy didn't. He confronted it. Any credit? He doesn't get an ounce of credit from the press. Now, if CNN, here's a message to you. If you want to obsess on him all day long, why don't you just obsess for about 20 seconds on what I just said?
Now, well, again, if we're looking for approval from the mainstream elite media, just no one on the conservative side of the ledger, except maybe those who hate Trump, will get any credit or.
But there are 2 ads. There are 2 ads that the Trump for re-election campaign is going to run. One is the pictures of his State of the Union speech with the Democrats sitting on their thumbs while he praises the American military. And the second one is going to be statements from the White House Correspondents' Dinner the other night.
I agree.
He's going to run against the press.
I agree. And I would also put images of the people all camped out ready to storm the border. I'm sorry, because I think people don't like that at all. I think this immigration issue is still a driver of his base, and and also there are a lot of Latinos now who are coming out saying this is not the way to immigrate into the United States, and a lot of the Latino voters don't like this either. I think it's a winner. Brent Bozell, we love you. We love Media Research Center. Thank you for everything you're doing, truly, for the First Amendment and keeping everybody honest out there. Brent Bozell, don't go away. Back on the Laura Ingraham Show, 855-40-LAURA. Amelia, Canada, line 2. Amelia.
Laura.
Hey.
Hi, Laura. I'm calling from Canada. I've never done this before. I just wanted to offer you a little piece of advice to you and to anybody else. You know how you don't refer to people who do the mass shooting? You don't want to give that person notoriety. My advice is this woman, and that's all I'll refer to her at the CNN course, but don't use her name. Nobody knew who she was before Saturday night, or very few people did. Now she's a household name. That's why she's not regretting saying what she said. She got what she wanted.
Yeah, I get your point, and there's some wisdom to that. But I think it is an abject lesson in depravity of the Democrat Party. I'm sorry, because most of the people praising her are big, fat liberals.
Your healthy radio addiction starts now.
Power to the people!
The Laura Ingraham Show.
Don't forget to remember me.
Now, we all know the heartbreaking story of Kate Steinle. The man who ended her life shouldn't have even been there that day. He'd been convicted of seven felonies and deported 5 times. But San Francisco is a so-called sanctuary city. Those who defend so-called sanctuary cities callously disregard how their extreme policies hurt others.
You are listening to The Laura Ingraham Show, 855-40-LAURA. There is a lot of news that we got to get to, and including this this obscene situation brewing on our southwest border with hundreds of illegal immigrants demanding entrance and demanding asylum, armed with lawyers funded by NGOs, and they're getting tutorials courtesy of Customs and Border Protection. They're getting tutorials in what claiming a credible fear actually requires. So they're actually being instructed not just by the lawyers, but by our customs officials. That's how it works. Before 2013, approximately 1% of arriving aliens claimed credible fear and thus wanted asylum. That's 1%. Now 1 out of 10 claim credible fear. So it's a 10-fold increase in only 5 years. What does that tell you? 10-fold increase from 1% to 10%? Oh, no, they're not gaming the system. These are all legit claims. It's ridiculous. So you heard that soundbite from Mitch McConnell on Kate's Law. And remember, of course, this was initially really pushed by Bill O'Reilly on Fox. Kate Steinle, of course, murdered in San Francisco by an individual who was deported several times from the United States. And he was he was a 7-time felon. And the Senate has still not voted on Kate's Law. McConnell, tried to bring the bill up. It didn't go anywhere. An earlier version of this law was considered back in 2016, but it needs to get that 60-vote threshold to overcome a Democratic filibuster. Only 3 Democrats at the time in 2016, Joe Donnelly of Indiana, Heidi Heitkamp, North Dakota, and Joe Manchin, voted with Republicans to end the debate and thus move the bill onto the full Senate floor.
What a beautiful, wonderful thing.
And so we think it's really important in this midterm election cycle for everyone to be really clear on where people like John Tester are. I mean, John Tester from Montana did not vote to allow Kate's Law to go to the full Senate for a full debate. And he's also in favor of sanctuary cities, giving them protection. Not any penalty for being a sanctuary city, sanctuary state. John Tester is all for it. And that guy should be reelected in Montana. Montanans cannot believe that guy is the best suited and to represent Montanans. I don't understand that for the life of me, unless you all want to become a big sanctuary state eventually and become like Minnesota, where it's 80,000 Somalis living in Minnesota in just one area of St. Paul. Unless Montana wants to go down that route, I guess they can, but I don't think they do. They want their state to remain the state that they love, with law and order, rule of law, beautiful place. They don't want problems. John Tester should be challenged on this issue, and every Democrat who is up for re-election should be questioned repeatedly on Kate's Law. So why doesn't Joe Manchin push Mitch McConnell to bring this bill up again? How about Heidi Heitkamp? Why isn't she going to Mitch McConnell? Why aren't they going to their Democrat colleagues and saying, we got to get this done for the American people. We have to get this done. And Kate's Law, in case you've forgotten, in the House it was H.R. 3004. The bill is basically directed at any illegal alien who's been excluded or deported, removed, or denied admission, or who left the United States while under an outstanding order of deportation. I'm paraphrasing for you because it gets kind of technical, the language. And if you attempt to cross back into the United States once you've been deported, excluded, denied permission to stay, or left under the order of exclusion but not under deportation, otherwise you left on your own, then you're trying to come back in, well, guess what? The law, the Kate's Law, you say you shall be fined, imprisoned, not more than 2 years or both, and the bill revises the reentry of the criminal offender provisions to provide that an alien who was convicted before such removal or departure of basically 3 or more misdemeanors or a felony shall be fined and imprisoned up to 10 years or both. A felony for which the alien was sentenced to not less than 30 months in prison, then if you come back, they should be in prison for 15 years or both, or in the fine. A felony for which the alien was sentenced to not less than 60 months, 5 years, shall be fined and imprisoned up to 20 years. Murder, rape, kidnapping, or felony offense relating to peonage or slavery or terrorism, shall be fined, imprisoned up to 25 years or both. An alien who's been excluded from the country, deported or removed, or denied admission 3 times or 3 or more times, and thereafter attempts to enter or crosses into the country, shall be fined, imprisoned not more than 10 years or both. Now, I find this to be too lax. I mean, it's very turgid, the way it's highlighted here. It's very turgid. But I find this to be lax. If you have been deported out of the United States and you try to come back, you should never be allowed to come back into the United States again. You should be forever barred from coming back into the United States. A removed alien who enters, attempts to enter, or crosses the border shall be incarcerated for the remainder of the sentence that was pending at the time of the deportation without any reduction for parole or supervised release. I mean, I would make this so much tougher. Don't you find this to be, of course they should be put in jail. I mean, but they should be removed from the country and never be allowed to come back in. But look, you have to put them away for a long time here because otherwise send them back to Honduras. They'll be right back the next week. But this is the minimum that we should do. But I love how it's 3 or more times if you cross into the country. What? One time. You've been deported. You try to come back here one time, forget it. I think if you've been deported, you should never be able to come back to the United States. I'm sorry. I just don't. We got plenty of people all over Europe, all over the world, South America, who want to do it the right way. Why, if you were deported, should you be able to come back into the United States? I don't understand that argument at all. And maybe there's a rare exception for some. I can't really think of one right now, though. Not with all the other people who are great cases for admission into the country. So that's where I am. But this is the minimum that these politicians should agree to. And again, I don't think this is tough enough. Kate's Law, to me, it needs to be a lot tougher. So, that was last summer. No, this summer, good lot of Virginia introduced Kate's Law to near universal Republican approval, and the bill also received backing across the aisle with 24 Democrats in the House voting yes on the Senate floor on June 29th. So that was June 29th of last summer, 2017. So that is still pending in the Senate. So that's not advanced at all, along with hundreds of other bills that came out of the House that just stuck in the Senate and never emerge. And some of them are actually really good. Now, we got a real problem here. So I have the view that actually Republicans can pick up seats. Now, you think I'm crazy. I think if Republicans are smart, they can pick up seats in the midterm election cycle. I do. Again, if they are smart. is a big caveat. We'll take a break. 855-40-LAURA. We got a lot of callers. We'll try to get to as many as possible. Jason in Montana, quickly, line 2. We also have Bill Gertz is going to join us. Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, the reason that John Tester is even a factor in Montana has to do with the influx of people into Montana from other states that are Democrats and the retirement communities. The biggest bulk of his help is out of the college towns, and the liberal-leaning college towns have actually moved him into the forefront of being a senator for Montana. So I think the bulk of Montanans don't agree with what he's doing, and I think he's going to pay a high price at the polls this year. We've got a couple of good candidates from the Republican Party. They have to work hard to get the word out to actually change Montana and flip it back to a Republican senator state.
I think Tester is vulnerable, very vulnerable. I really do. And you're right. I don't think a lot of those college kids vote. I'd like to see the numbers on that. But, incumbents usually win. But I think he's vulnerable. On the immigration issue, that is gold for Republicans. I'm going to say this till I'm blue in the face. That is gold for Republicans in the midterm election cycle. Stand with this president. We need a wall. You spend $116 billion a year on illegal immigrants. $116 billion. Oh, by the way, they're getting lawyers and interpreters too. Okay? Getting all these benefits. We can build this wall for $30 billion. Imagine if we just had significant deportations, would save billions of dollars every year. So we got to do this. We got to do this for the people. We got to do this for your kids and grandkids. We'll take a break. We're going to talk to Bill Gertz. We'll get back on this issue after the break, and after we talk to Gertz. Daryl Issa is going to join us as well. A lot to get to. Don't go away.
The Iran deal, the nuclear deal, is based on lies. It's based on Iranian lies and Iranian deception. The nuclear deal gives Iran a clear path to an atomic arsenal. First, unlimited enrichment in a few years. Second, it completely fails to address Iran's continuing development of ballistic missiles. And third, and this is new, it completely fails to address Iran's secret nuclear bomb program and its advanced work on weaponization.
Iran, the supreme leader, replied to Bibi Netanyahu's very detailed presentation with 55,000 pages of evidence and binders and charts and big graphics by saying basically he's lost his mind. And he called it a stunt. It's ridiculous, doesn't mean anything. But where does this leave the administration, our country? With the Iran deal, the president has to decide whether to pull out of the Iran deal or extend it for some period of time. Joining us now, Bill Gertz, senior editor and national security columnist of the Washington Free Beacon. He joins us now to discuss this and new developments on China. Bill, it's good to talk to you. What's your sense on why Bibi acted when he did?
Hi, Laura. Clearly, this is time to the president's decision later this month to either stay in or pull out. My guess is it was an intelligence coup. The Israelis are very good at this kind of human intelligence. They were able to get inside and steal the secrets of their nuclear program. This is an amazing feat, in my view. And clearly it was time to try and influence the president's decision on this Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA as they call it.
Well, it seemed fairly detailed, but I mean, of course, the evidence is over the heads of most people. Do you think this is going to have an impact on Trump? Do you think this means the end of the deal, or where do you sense this going?
Pretty much. I mean, the last time this decision was made, we had a different team in there. We had McMaster at the White House, Tillerson at State. Now, the people who are going to be the influencers on the president's decision are Mattis, who's very tough on Iran, Pompeo at the State Department, who is one of the main critics of the Iran deal, and of course John Bolton, who was the Undersecretary of State for Arms Control, and clearly is no fan of the Iran deal, which really is a bad deal. It reminds me so much of this 1994 agreed framework with North Korea. It was a total scam by the North Koreans to buy time to build nuclear weapons. I think the Iranians are doing the same thing.
Bill, let's move to the other issue, of course, that you and I spend so much time thinking about and you reporting about, which is China's infiltration into the U.S., specifically what China has done in research universities across the country. And now the White House is considering restricting Chinese researchers over espionage fears. I don't know why it's taken so long, but these Confucian centers that were set up all across the United States by China, seeming to give all this money to universities. Oh, it's great, they're learning Mandarin, but it all came at a cost.
Yeah, what we're seeing is a major shift in U.S. policy towards China, and it started late last year with the new national security strategy from the White House, which was followed by a new national defense strategy at the Pentagon. And the key change is that terrorism, which was at the top of the threat priorities, has been lowered, and now it's Russia and China. And China is really the big dog because if you look at their economy, it's like 7 times larger than the Russians, although the Russians are doing bad things with nuclear weapons in Ukraine. But clearly the Chinese are moving ahead, and now the administration has the ability with this new strategy to take tougher action. We're seeing it in the trade sphere, and we're starting to see it in the counterintelligence and intelligence sphere. Bill Evanina, who's the national counterintelligence czar under the DNI, gave a talk where I asked him about these Confucius centers, and he said, yeah, they're using them for spying. Now, most of them are legitimate students, but a small percentage, and there's 350,000, so even a small percentage means that there's a large number of Chinese spies infiltrating the U.S. and stealing our advanced technology, especially in areas like artificial intelligence as well as quantum computing. There was a House hearing a couple of weeks ago that said that a large majority of the Cal Berkeley Special Laboratory on Artificial Intelligence are PRC nationals. Same with the University of Maryland.
So Chinese nationals, both places, for AI, which is the big new field in computing and high tech. That's where they're going to do machine learning and be able to come up with algorithms to determine outcomes before prior computer programming could ever do, or obviously before humans could ever predict. Bill Gertz, fantastic reporting on this as always. We have our eye trained on China. We always believe we cover other areas of the world when we should be covering China more, and that's a big mistake. Coming up, Daryl Issa is going to join us and a lot more.
This week on All of the Above with Norman Lear, actor, author Sean Penn sits down with Norman and Paul to talk about his new book, Bob Honey Who Just Do Stuff.
Perhaps a truth worth grabbing and holding on to for dear life, that where life is really lived in the simple places of love and happiness. Bob owned neither. And in lieu of that, only solitude would suffice.
Be sure to download new episodes of All of the Above with Norman Lear every Monday on the Podcast One app, at podcastone.com, or at Apple Podcasts. And don't forget to leave a rating and review.
Open the door, I'll bust it in.
The message for Customs and Border Protection: stop rejecting asylum seekers who try to present themselves at the port of entry. You know what you're doing. You know you turn people away. You complain that they are breaking the law by entering illegally. You are breaking the law, and you are forcing them to break the law. That's why we have caravans.
You're listening to your Healthy Radio Addiction, the Laura Ingraham Show. That was Nicole Ramos, who is a immigration attorney living in Mexico, American living in Mexico. She was also screaming about how the refusal to admit these migrants into the United States is another example of white nationalism. She said that lovely as well. We have now on the line with us, I'm delighted he's with us, haven't talked to him in way too long, Congressman Daryl Issa, Republican from California's 49th District. As we see these people sleeping on the streets and CNN's embedded with them. And, of course, every case is a sad case, and they want your sympathy and they want admission, and they want it now. And we're going to find out how we can put an end to this, because this madness has to stop. And Congressman Issa is with us now. Congressman, you represent part of San Diego County, and this influx of illegal immigrants has completely transformed California from the first time I traveled there as a college student in 1985 to today. It's a very different place. Still a beautiful place, of course, but it is a very different place because of these sanctuary policies and failure to enforce our border. Give us an update, if you could, sir, about what is happening at the southern border where these migrants are gathered.
One of the things that is happening at the southern border is that the president is now attempting to enforce our relatively weak laws. One of the most important parts he's doing that is having an effect is he's charging people if they break the law in this process. He's appropriately looking at those who were aiding and abetting these people to tell lies. Understand, Laura, huge chunks of people who claim asylum later are found to have outright been coached to do that purely for economic reasons. But I think the most important thing the president's doing, and he's tweeted about it, but he's also engaged the United States government, is he's pushing Mexico to obey international law. Under international law, the asylum is in the first place you go to, not the place you want to go to. Everyone in the world that lives in adverse poverty wants to go to a better place, and what better place than the United States? We cannot take 6 billion people, particularly when they've turned down an opportunity in Mexico to seek asylum, because quite frankly, they're not seeking asylum. The vast majority are simply what one likes to call economic refugees or economic opportunists.
Well, I think, again, people don't understand that we have entire industries here in the country and in Honduras and in Guatemala and in Salvador and in Mexico that are supporting this mass migration of humanity into the United States. We have businesses in this country who are supporting it for the cheap labor, under the table paid. We have government officials. Let's not forget, and I missed this somehow, Congressman Issa, when it first happened, but the ambassador from Honduras to Mexico actually marched with the migrants at one point a few weeks ago, and he said, and I quote, "I have been ordered by my government to support the Honduran migrants traveling with the caravan. There are about 200 Hondurans who we will help out with paperwork and whatever is necessary." Okay, I never saw that until just now when I was getting ready for your interview. Trump should say to Honduras, this ends now, or our assistance to your country ends now. We're done. We're done with this. I find this to be a complete violation of international norms of sovereignty and borders.
Well, it's opportunism by a country that we're already helping. And this is true to a lesser extent in Guatemala and Nicaragua. In these countries, the number one or two greatest sources of foreign money coming in is not export of products, it's foreign remittances, meaning money from people who have come to the United States. They are doing this as a national policy in many cases. And, you know, a couple of years ago when we had all the children showing up at the U.S. Texas
2014.
border,
Yep.
Right. I went down and visited these countries, and the one thing that was profound was that Mexico, if they try to stay there, was deporting them very quickly, completely looking at that and realizing it wasn't asylum. They were very aggressive. The buses came back very quickly. We need that same level of cooperation from Mexico. It's one thing to have legitimate asylum seekers coming from countries in which Christians are being systematically killed.
No, we keep them out.
Blown up.
Yeah, we keep them out.
Well,
we don't let them in.
And that's one of the challenges is there are people who in real fear for
Iraq,
their lives for what they did for us. There's the case of this Afghan
interpreter
woman pilot. Exactly. And so we have real asylum. We're very generous. More people come to this country legally than any other country on the face of the earth. We are generous. What we have done, and unfortunately will continue to do, even with the president's best efforts, is we have put in laws that make it so easy to tell essentially a line and get in the United States and then be here for years or perhaps forever. It has to change. Congress has to step up to the plate. In the current ratio of Republicans and Democrats, it's not going to happen. So the president is rightfully doing the best he can do, which is strictly enforcing the law.
Well, is there anything we can do on the non-contiguous country rapid deportation instead of allowing people to come into the country? If you're an unaccompanied minor, you're immediately released after being processed. If you're a parent of a minor, you're released to a sponsor. This, the Flores decision from 1997, an activist judge ended up changing the way we dealt with illegal immigrants at our admission point. But we need to process people quickly and return them to their home countries. This should be a rapid processing, and instead it's a rapid resettlement into our communities in this country.
Exactly. And there are three things the president can do, and he's doing all of them. One, he's incarcerating as many people as he can and processing them as quickly as he can. What you noted from that report just before coming on the air is critical. Getting the facts on this systematic, if you will, criminal activity of planning in advance to send people here from these countries. As we make that case, we have a case for mass refusal of these individuals. And lastly, if Mexico wants a renewal of NAFTA, they better start enforcing the common decency laws, whether it's environmental or immigration related, which means these people should not have been green-lighted, literally green-lighted all the way up here. We've watched them come as Mexico has simply passed them through as though they had a visa to come to the U.S. when they clearly didn't.
Well, they gave them 30-day and 60-day, basically, as you said, pass-through visas. But apparently, I talked to one Mexican official who was adamant that they did deport a lot of these caravan members. And it was only after Trump started tweeting about it and basically threatening the NAFTA deal that this thing magically started to reconstitute. But they actually did deport a whole bunch of them. It was 1,000 people. And they managed to deport a lot of them. But now apparently 25 Somalis are part of the caravan who weren't in the caravan before. And we don't know who these people are. I find it to be just a complete scandal. And meanwhile, I saw L.A. County, Garcetti's now spending $438 million in the budget for short-term and long-term homelessness subsidies for building new homeless shelters and direct subsidies, only 20% of that. But that's a lot of dough out of the L.A. budget for homelessness, and apparently they want to make that problem worse.
Well, this is one of the problems in California. You mentioned it. Look, this is still a beautiful, beautiful place. I'm as we speak, I'm looking at the Pacific Ocean out my window. It is beautiful, but the politics of this state have become the politics of illegal immigration. They're the politics of import, register, and thus control on a one-sided basis. We used to say that the labor unions ran the Democratic Party. Well, in California, this illegal immigration lobby runs California. It drives these decisions for sanctuaries, even when virtually every sheriff and police chief is objecting to releasing criminal aliens rather than deporting them. But it's not their need for safety is not as strong as the politics of California.
Well, the labor for the fields. You could have a guest worker program that does not allow immigration, migrants to stay. But I think the birthright citizenship issue has to be changed. There are so many ways to game the system. And you see that with a lot of the women coming in. They're 17, 16 years old. They already have 3 kids. And then it's
you do see that. But I will tell you, if you go to Costa Rica, as I have done, and you meet with people who actually have guest visas, the H-2s, and there are a certain amount of those that succeed, they are thrilled to have an opportunity to leave their family, make 4 to 8 times as much money as the best job in Costa Rica, keep their family in schools, keep the family united, and build homes and businesses there. The reality is that a guest worker program that brings a worker for a time and then keeps them attached to their community is a win for the farmers in California and Arizona, and it's a win for America, and it's a win for those countries. We simply have to have the will to realize that helping those countries is not always by simply chain migrating the best and the brightest from there. And, Laura, we all concentrate on the criminal element that comes here, but there's another side to it, which is people who have ambition have left these countries and left them with less hope for the future. The reality is we are not even doing those countries a favor by allowing this practice. And can we change it? Yes. Are we going to change it as long as the Democrat Party relentlessly insists that things like the DACA compromise is being considered, that clearly isn't going to change any of these fundamental flaws? That's the only compromise they'll make is you compromise and we're going to
do nothing.
Chain migration going.
We're never going to end chain migration. Chain migration is their gold. They believe it's electoral gold. I still believe illegal immigrants are voting in elections, contrary to what everybody says. I don't believe it for a moment that it's like 24 people. I'm sorry, not with the driver's licenses and everything else. By the way, you were right about Honduras remittances, Congressman. They have skyrocketed in the United States. The tradingeconomics.com site has the data, and it is wild. It's in April of 2017, it went up to $430 million just in the month of April of last year, and that was up from $343 million from the previous April. So that is a shocker, and so that's their big influx of money. And it's coming from the United States, and they don't want that to end. So, Congressman Issa, come on TV soon. It's great to have you on. We really, really appreciate you, and we need more Republicans in California. And I hope Trump goes to California. He needs to do more trips to California, spread the good news of this economy and law and order, safety, community. And I think he can make inroads in California. I'm not giving up on California. No way, and I know you're not, Congressman. Thanks so much. Have a great week.
Thank you, Laura.
All right, we'll take a break. 855-40-LAURA. Yep, remittances. Those are from short-term workers in the United States. Migrant workers hit record highs last year, according to a recent World Bank report, and Honduras is among the highest increases in those remittances. And you bet that ambassador is going to march with the migrants. Keep them coming. Don't go away. All right, let's go to Mark in Iowa, line 3. Mark has an idea for raising money for the wall. Mark.
Yeah, hi, Laura. Hey, last night watching Fox, I was sitting there watching them illegals up there on the fence flying their flag, and I had a thought, why not pass a law, a bill, or some type to allow Western Union to charge 4 or 5%, and you could use that money to help.
Yeah, we've talked about that before on the show. I'd say 25%, 50% tax. Trump has mentioned that in the past. Remittances should be taxed at a very high level. I agree. A lot of these people are getting paid in cash, and then they're funneling the cash back home. Absolutely. It's ridiculous. By the way, John McCain has a book out saying he's retiring and dying so he can speak his mind without fearing the consequences. Does that mean he wasn't speaking his mind before? That's what I'm reading online. Does that mean he wasn't speaking his mind before? He wasn't being truthful before? Fearing consequences. So now we live in fear of the voters. I thought we were supposed to represent the voters. Obviously, John McCain is in a terrible health situation, but that's kind of a shocking comment, don't you think? Let's go to Jess, Mississippi, line 2. Jess.
Good morning, Laura. First of all, I want to say, love the angle.
Thank you. Keep watching. Spread the word.
You bet. I'm going to do it now. First of all, last year we paid $338 billion to illegals, okay? And the pastor of the church up in Memphis, Tennessee, Adrian Rogers, said, you cannot give to somebody what you don't first take away from somebody else. So it all boils down to, why do they want to come to America? Because they're being given.
Well, they didn't want to stay in Mexico. They passed through Mexico over several weeks. Didn't want to stay there. Mexico would have offered a helping hand, I'm sure. They want to come to the land of plenty. Milk and honey in the United States. Stay with us.
Thanks for listening to the Laura Ingraham Show podcast. Download new episodes every week at podcastone.com. That's podcastone.com.
The hit true crime series, Murder Made Me Famous, is now on Podcast One, showcasing some of the most notorious crimes imaginable, including Scott Peterson, Jodi Arias, Ted Bundy, and more. See how murder made them famous. New episodes starting every Tuesday on Apple Podcasts, as well as PodcastOne.com and the Podcast One app. And check out the new season of Murder Made Me Famous, starting Saturday, April 14th on the Reels channel.
I'm Rita Foley with an AP News Minute. The president is tweeting that it would seem very hard to obstruct justice for a crime that never happened. His tweet comes as lead Russia investigator Robert Mueller sends dozens of questions to President Trump's attorneys.
That's according to the New York Times, which obtained that list, and reports that they range from President Trump's motivation for firing FBI Director James Comey to contacts the Trump campaign had with Russians.
Jackie Quinn reporting from Washington. The U.S. has now allowed several immigrants in that caravan at the Mexican border to enter the country to apply for asylum. Ashley Judd says she wants Harvey Weinstein held accountable for what she calls illegal conduct that caused her to lose money, status, prestige, and power. She is suing him in Los Angeles, saying he harmed her acting career because she rejected his sexual advances. I'm Rita Foley.